Hey there, and welcome. Today we're going to talk about a word that gets thrown around all the time, tolerance. But what does it actually mean? It can be pretty confusing because it seems to mean different things to different people. So we're going to dive into a very specific take on it, one that's rooted in biblical principles, and see how it stacks up against some of our more modern ideas.
So let's just get right to it with the big question that's at the heart of all this. Does being a tolerant person mean you have to accept every single idea, belief, and action out there as being totally valid? It's a really interesting question, and it sets up the whole conversation we're about to have.
Okay, so let's break this down. On one hand, you've got this really common modern view of tolerance, and it often gets boiled down to the idea that, hey, all perspectives are equally legitimate. But then on the other hand, you have the idea we're digging into today, a biblical view. And this one's different. It's more of a balancing act between loving people no matter what, while also holding on to what you believe is true. As you can see, these two things are not the same, and understanding that difference is really what this is all about.
So to do that, we obviously need a good, clear definition. What are we even talking about when we say biblical tolerance? Let's get specific.
Here it is. It's not about pretending disagreements don't exist. It's all about how you act when they do. It means treating people with love, respect, and kindness, especially when you disagree. And that last part is so important. It's about balancing that compassion for others with being faithful to your own principles. It's kind of like a two-sided coin. You need both. And you know, the whole foundation for this idea really comes from core commands like this one. Love your neighbor as yourself. This isn't just a friendly piece of advice. It's presented as one of the most important commands there is. It demands a baseline of respect and care for other people, period. It doesn't matter who they are or what they believe. This is the ground floor for everything else we're going to talk about.
Okay, so if that's the foundation, how do you actually build on it? Well, the source material gives us 4 really practical guiding principles to follow.
First up, it starts with a pretty radical kind of love, one that extends not just to your friends and neighbors, but even to your enemies. From there, it says to avoid harsh judgment. You know, the whole idea of looking at your own issues first. The third principle is all about how you engage with people. Practice patience and gentleness. Don't just get into fights. And finally, number 4 is about valuing unity, realizing that just because we're different doesn't mean we have to be divided.
All right, principles are great and all, but what does this actually look like when the rubber hits the road? The best way to really get it is to look at a few stories, a few case studies that show these ideas in action.
So our first example is this famous interaction between Jesus and a Samaritan woman. Now, to really feel the weight of this story, you've got to understand that Jews and Samaritans, back then, they did not get along at all. We're talking deep religious and cultural divides. They were not supposed to be talking, especially not sharing a public well.
But his approach just puts all those principles into motion. He deliberately crosses that cultural line and shows her personal respect. He doesn't lecture her, he talks with her. And he shares his beliefs, that's the truth side of the coin, but he does it without condemning her. It was all about building a bridge, not putting up a wall.
Okay, next up, we have Zacchaeus. And listen, you have to know that tax collectors in that time and place were basically public enemy number 1. They were seen as traitors who worked for the enemy, the Roman occupiers, and got rich by cheating their own people. Everybody hated them.
So what happens? Instead of shunning him like everyone else, Jesus spots him in a crowd and invites himself over to his house for dinner, which back then was a huge sign of acceptance. He showed this radical acceptance of the person, even though society had totally rejected him. And it was that act of kindness and acceptance that made Zacchaeus want to change. The acceptance came first.
All right, for our last case study, let's look at the Apostle Paul in Athens. Just picture it. He's standing in the philosophical capital of the ancient world, and it is just filled to the brim with idols and beliefs that are the complete opposite of his own. I mean, he disagrees with pretty much everything he sees.
So you'd think he'd just start arguing, right? But check out his method. He doesn't start by tearing everything down. First, he just walks around and observes everything respectfully. He actually finds common ground. He even quotes their own poets to make a connection. He connects with them on their level before he ever challenges their ideas, and when he does, he shares his own beliefs without being hostile about it. It's really a masterclass in how to engage respectfully.
Now, after hearing all those examples, it might be easy to think that this is just about unlimited, unconditional acceptance of everything. But that's not quite right. Understanding the limits of this idea is actually just as important as understanding the principles.
And this right here, this is probably the single most important distinction in this entire way of thinking.
It's the idea that you separate the person from their actions or their beliefs. The call is to love and respect the person always, but that does not mean you have to endorse or approve of every single behavior.
So why have these limits? Well, there are a few key reasons. First, upholding what is seen as truth is absolutely essential. It's not something you just compromise on. Second, correction is actually considered a part of love, but, and this is a big but, it has to be done with gentleness, not with harsh judgment. And third, there's a really practical warning about not letting yourself be corrupted by harmful influences. It's about being wise, not just being open to everything.
So, let's pull all this into our world. What does a 2,000-year-old concept about tolerance really have to do with our lives right now, with our conversations at school, at work, or even in online comment sections?
When you boil it all down, it really comes back to this one powerful idea. This whole framework, it's less about what you believe, and so much more about how you treat people who believe differently than you. The focus is on your conduct, on your kindness, on your respect, even when you profoundly disagree with someone, especially then.
Let's make this super practical. Imagine you have a classmate, and they hold a view that is the total opposite of yours. Following this model, what do? Well, you listen to them without blowing up. You treat them with kindness as a person, and maybe, if it's the right time and place, you'd respectfully share your own perspective. But here's the big one. Notice the X. You are not required to endorse their view or say that it's just as valid as yours. You can hold on to your convictions while still honoring them as a human being.
And all of this leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. This whole conversation really shines a light on a tension that, let's be honest, we all live with. In a world that feels so divided, figuring out how to handle our disagreements is absolutely critical. So the question I'll leave you with is this. Where do you, personally, draw the line between showing kindness and compromising your core beliefs? It's a tough one. Thanks for thinking it through with me.